Monday morning, a text from my mom. I just used your card for a bill. We'll transfer it back in a bit. 2 hours later, my bank app showed only a few dollars, 10,000, gone. I stood in the glass lobby of Norcrest Dynamics, my access badge still clipped to my shirt, hearing her small voice on the phone. It was just an advance. That sentence pulled me into a hunt where the target wasn't just the money, but an exposure right in the middle of the company. My name is Ava Monroe. I am 32 years old, and I am the head of payment risk control for Norcrest Dynamics. From my office on the 19th floor, I can see the steel-gray sprawl of West Grove, a city that runs on transactions I am paid to protect. My world is one of data, firewalls, and the quiet, constant hunt for patterns that signal theft. I am good at my job because I believe in one simple truth. Money never lies. People do. I was proving that very point, my screen alive with the final slides for a 10 a.m. presentation on internal fraud vulnerabilities, when my phone vibrated on the cool glass desk, a text from my mom. Mom, I just used your card for a bill. We'll transfer it back in a bit. I stared at the message, a knot of irritation tightening in my stomach. I was in workflow, deep in the mental architecture of tracing bad actors. The interruption was unwelcome, the casualness of it. Just used your card? Was worse. I didn't reply immediately. I had a keynote to finalize. I toggled back to my presentation slide. Vector 3, Social Engineering and Familial Credential Abuse. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Almost? A second vibration. 10 minutes later, not a text. It was a push notification from my personal bank, Alder and Finch. Alder and Finch, a payment of $1,850 has been processed. My breath hitched. A bill? What bill cost nearly $2,000 and couldn't wait for a phone call? I swiped the notification, my thumbprint unlocking the app. The clean, minimalist interface of Alder and Finch loaded. The polite green and white branding suddenly feeling sterile, offensive. My checking account balance was $4,102.19. No, wait, the screen refreshed. My balance was $2,252.19. Another notification pinged silently at the top of my screen while the app was open. Alder and Finch. A payment of $1,150 has been processed. The balance updated in real time. $702.98. What the hell? I whispered, my gaze snapping from my phone to my locked office door. It was 9:15 a.m. Ping, $700,000. Balance, $1,197.81. Ping, $1,750,000. Balance, $2,947.81. Ping, $1,400,000. Balance, $4,347.81. Ping, $1,600,000. Balance, $5,947.81. It wasn't one bill. It was six. 6 rapid-fire transactions, draining my checking account and now pulling deep from the overdraft protection linked to my high-yield savings. I tapped on the savings account, the number that was supposed to be my emergency fund, my down payment, my future. It read, 784. The blood drained from my face. $10,000. Gone. Evaporated in under 3 minutes. I scrolled through the transaction log, my professional brain taking over, overriding the sick, hollow core feeling of violation. The transactions were all different, all substantial, but all strategically under the $2,000 mark. They weren't random holds. They were clean, completed transfers. This wasn't an accident. This was structured. This was smurfing, breaking up a large transaction into smaller, less conspicuous amounts to fly under automated fraud detection thresholds. My phone rang, splitting the silence. Mom. I jabbed the accept icon. What did you do? My voice was flat, cold, the voice I used on vendors who failed an audit. Ava, honey, don't use that tone. Her voice came through, light as air, infuriatingly casual. I told you, I just had to pay a bill. I must have grabbed your card from your purse by mistake last night when I came by to drop off your wallet. My wallet? I looked at my purse. My black leather wallet was sitting right inside. Wait, I remembered. She'd come by last night. Said I'd left my other wallet, my smaller beige one, at her place after dinner at the Brickwell last week. I hadn't even missed it. She'd handed it to me, smiling, and I'd just tossed it in my bag. The card must have been in there. Mom, I said, my teeth clenched. You didn't pay a bill. You made 6 payments. You drained my entire savings account. $10,000 is gone. Oh, it couldn't be, she laughed. A nervous, breathy sound that set my nerves on edge. It was just one bill, a hospital bill, for a procedure. It was very last minute. I was so flustered. I must have entered the number wrong. Don't worry, honey, we'll get it sorted out. The lie was so bald, so clumsy. It was an insult. Entered the number wrong? 6 times? For 6 different amounts? That's not how it works. And you know it. What did you do? Ava, you're stressing me out. I told you it's a hospital bill. Which hospital? I was already scrolling through the transaction details on the Alder and Finch app. The beneficiary name was listed for all 6. It wasn't Westgrove General or Mercy Medical. The beneficiary is Silver Lantern Relief, I read aloud. I've never heard of it. It's listed as a nonprofit foundation. Silence on the other end. A long, humming pause that confirmed everything. Nora, I said, dropping Mom. My voice was lethal. Who is Silver Lantern Relief? It's the billing company. Ava, they handle the payments for the clinic, she said, her voice suddenly smaller. It's complicated. It's not complicated, I shot back. I'm looking at 6 structured withdrawals, a classic smurfing technique, routed to an obscure nonprofit. You didn't pay a bill. You moved my money. Send me the original invoice, right now. Ava, I'm not feeling well. All this. Send me the invoice, or my next call is to the police to report the card stolen. It was a bluff. I couldn't report my own mother. Not yet. Fine. You're always so dramatic, she hung up. A minute later, a text message arrived. It was a photo, not a PDF, not a forwarded email, but a blurry, poorly lit photo of what looked like a piece of paper. The top, where a hospital or clinic logo would be, was cropped out. The bottom, with the total amount and payment details, was also cut off. All I could see was a few lines of itemized charges, all vague. Consultation fee, processing, specialist services, and a name, my mother's. It was useless. It was intentionally useless. The edges were fuzzy, the text distorted from the angle. She was treating me like an idiot. A new ping sounded, but this time it wasn't from my phone. It was from my desktop, my professional life reasserting itself. It was an automated alert from the Norcrest vendor management system. My system, the one I designed. Flag, new vendor beneficiary. Match, vendor, Silver Lantern Relief Rule. Triggered, beneficiary name, SLR Processing LLC, matches a high-risk entity flagged on external watch lists. Manual review required. Submitted by Office of the CFO. The room went silent. The hum of the HVAC system faded. The sounds of the city outside my window disappeared. There was only the thudding of my own heart, a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. Silver Lantern Relief. The name was no longer just a mystery on my personal bank account. It was here, inside my company, inside my system, approved by the Chief Financial Officer. My fingers flew across my keyboard, all thought of the presentation gone. I was no longer a daughter. I was the head of risk. I initiated the kill switch on my debit card. Card status, blocked. I opened a new case file in the Alder and Finch fraud portal. Reason, unauthorized transactions. Known party. I filled in the 6 transaction IDs, the amounts, the beneficiary name. I knew what the answer would be, but I had to follow the steps. While that processed, I toggled back to the Norcrest internal system. I pulled the vendor file for Silver Lantern Relief. It was thin, barely any history. Signed 2 weeks ago? The justification was for community outreach and charitable campaign matching. The payment terms were immediate. The pieces clicked into place with sickening speed. The structured payments from my account, the new, suspicious vendor at my company, the link, my mother. My phone chimed. An email from Alder and Finch. Fraud claim 88902B1177. Dear Ms. Monroe, we have reviewed your claim. The transactions in question were authenticated via debit card and PIN. Furthermore, the funds have already been cleared and transferred by the receiving entity from their processing account to an external e-wallet service, VeloPay. As these were not unauthorized ACH or credit transactions, and the funds have left our system, we are unable to reverse the charges. We have blocked the card as requested. We recommend contacting the merchant, Silver Lantern Relief, and law enforcement. The money was gone, not pending, not in dispute, gone, laundered out of the traditional banking system and into the digital ether in less than 15 minutes. This was fast. This was professional. My heart was hammering. A frantic bird in my chest. I felt cold, hollowed out. $10,000. But it wasn't the money, not really. It was the calculated, cold-blooded nature of the theft. It was the technique. My mother didn't know how to smurf. She didn't know how to set up pass-through accounts with e-wallet services. She couldn't even manage to send a clean PDF. She was a pawn. She was a tool, an entry point. My brain, my beautiful, cold, analytical brain, took the wheel. The panic subsided, replaced by an icy calm. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a coordinated attack. They had used my mother as a social engineering vector to access my personal funds, and simultaneously, they were embedding themselves in my company. They were in my house. I closed the Alder and Finch app. I closed my presentation slides. I picked up my company-issued, encrypted notebook and a black pen. I wrote down one clean, simple line. If Mom knows smurfing, she's not alone. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair. The silence of my 19th floor office a pressurized capsule. The presentation on internal fraud I was supposed to be giving in 10 minutes was forgotten. My personal bank account was a crater. My corporate risk system was blinking red with the exact same name that had just stolen from me, Silver Lantern Relief, and at the center of the vortex, Nora, my mother. Her voice echoed in my head, a soundtrack to 1,000 justifications over 32 years. Ava, honey, money in the family is still the family's money. It was her mantra. Her absolution for every dollar she borrowed from my birthday cards, every loan for a utility bill that was never, ever repaid. To Nora Monroe, financial boundaries were a personal insult. My income was not my own. It was a resource for the collective, and she was the chief distributor. It had always been this way. I was the one who broke the pattern. I got the academic scholarships. I worked 2 jobs in college, one shelving dusty legal texts in the university library, one bartending in a dive bar that smelled of stale beer and desperation, all while studying finance and data analytics. I learned to build walls around my money. I remember coming home for Christmas my junior year, proud of the $2,500 I had scraped together and hidden in an account she didn't know about. I'd bought her a nice coat. She'd cried, then asked how much I had left. When I was vague, she'd found my bank statement. You shouldn't keep this much in checking. Ava, it's not safe. Let me put it in my high-yield savings for you. I get a better rate. Safe, I learned, just meant accessible to her. I'd refused, and the resulting emotional storm had lasted until Easter. I learned then, my success wasn't my own. It was a commodity. My achievements were her bragging rights, and my salary was her backup plan. But this was different. This wasn't the clumsy, tear-filled manipulation I was used to. This was smurfing. This was 6 structured, rapid-fire transactions routed through a processor to an e-wallet. This was sophisticated. This wasn't Nora. She couldn't even manage to send a clean PDF. This had the fingerprints of someone new. Grant. My stomach tightened. Grant Lyle. He had materialized out of nowhere 3 months ago. A supposed old friend from high school she had just reconnected with. He was all polished shoes, teeth that were too white, and a vaguely defined job in private equity or financial consulting, or whatever term he used that week to sound important without saying anything. He smelled of expensive cologne and cheap ambition. I'd met him 4, maybe 5 times. Each time, his focus was unnervingly on me, not her. Ava Monroe, he'd said the first time, shaking my hand, his grip too firm. Head of risk at Norcrest. That's heavy stuff. You must see it all. The dark side of finance. I see the patterns, I'd said, pulling my hand back. I remembered explaining a complex shell company scheme to him and my mother over dinner, trying to make my work relatable. We trace digital fingerprints, I'd said. We find patterns that don't make sense, then we follow the money until it stops. My mother had just waved her hand dismissively, laughing her tinkling, nervous laugh. Oh, Ava, you're overthinking it. It's just numbers. You make it sound so criminal. Grant had just sipped his wine, watching me over the rim. Impressive, he'd murmured. A fortress. You're the gatekeeper. At the time, I thought he was placating her. Now, I saw it as reconnaissance. He was mapping my defenses. That was the same night, 6 weeks ago, that she'd asked me for a supplementary credit card. We were standing by the coat check, Grant conveniently off taking a call. Just for emergencies, honey, she'd whispered, grabbing my arm. It would make me feel so much safer, just to know I have it. I saw Grant's reflection in the lobby glass over her shoulder. Risk. My brain had screamed. A supplementary card links her spending directly to my credit history, my liability. It was an unsecured, open-ended line of credit attached to my name. I can't do that. Mom, I'd said firmly, it's a compliance issue with my job. I can't be co-signed with anyone who isn't a spouse, but I can give you a prepaid card. I'll load $500 on it for you, for real emergencies. The disappointment on her face had been theatrical. Oh, well, if that's all you think I'm worth. She'd pulled her arm away. Grant had returned, sliding his arm around her. It's okay. Nora, she's just being careful. It's her job. I'd set up the prepaid card. I felt I'd successfully managed the risk, enforced a boundary. I was a goddamn fool. I had denied them the front door, so they'd simply pick the lock. The lock-picking. It happened last night. It was so simple, so infuriatingly smooth. Family dinner at the Brickwell, a noisy Italian place downtown. It was supposed to be a welcome home for my cousin, but Grant was there, stuck to my mother's side. My recent promotion at Norcrest, the one that made me head of payment risk, was the topic of conversation. We're just so proud, my mother kept beaming, raising her glass of Prosecco. All that hard work. You have to remember to be grateful to the family that supported you. No one gets to the top alone. Grateful. The word she used like a credit card swipe, expecting payment. As we were leaving, bundled in our coats by the door, she'd rushed over, holding my other wallet, the small beige card holder I hadn't used in months, the one I kept my backup debit card in, the high-limit one from Alder and Finch. Ava, you left this at my place last week. I keep forgetting to give it back to you, she'd exclaimed, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'd been confused. Oh, thanks. I hadn't even missed it. I took it from her and, distracted by my cousin saying goodbye, I dropped it into the bottom of my purse without thinking. Now, in my silent office, the memory replayed in high definition. I hadn't just taken it from her. She had pressed it into my hand, her fingers gripping mine for a second too long, and as she did, I remembered Grant's eyes. They weren't on me. They weren't on my mother. They darted down to my purse, a quick, sharp flick to where the beige wallet disappeared. It wasn't a glance. It was a confirmation, a visual check that the package was secure. They hadn't just returned a lost item. They had planted a tracking device. They had planted the weapon, knowing exactly which card was inside, and waited. The cold deepened. A physical ache in my chest. The hospital bill. It was the perfect excuse. It was tailored to pull at the one string I couldn't cut. Guilt. I'd been worrying about her health for months. A persistent cough, fatigue, complaints of shortness of breath. She'd resisted seeing a doctor until I'd forced the issue, scheduling a full workup with a pulmonary specialist. I'd taken the afternoon off. I'd sat with her in the sterile waiting room just 2 weeks ago. I'd used the prepaid card I gave her to cover the specialist copay. The results had come back last Friday. I'd been on the 3-way call with her and the doctor. "Nora, everything looks clear," the doctor had said, his voice reassuring. "Lungs are fine, blood work is perfect, a little borderline on cholesterol, but you're in excellent health for 58. Whatever you were feeling must have been stress-related. All clear, completely normal, a clean bill of health." I stared at the name on my corporate monitor. Silver Lantern Relief. I stared at the 5,947.81 on my phone screen. The emotional lag was breaking. The shock was cracking. And beneath it was a pure, cold white rage. It wasn't just $10,000. It was the scan, the planning, the manipulation, the use of her clean bill of health as a perfect, airtight alibi for a non-existent medical emergency. She wasn't sick. There was no procedure. There was no hospital bill. So, what bill was really being paid? And why did the payment have to go to a shell company that was, at this very moment, also infiltrating my company? This wasn't about family. This was about finance. And Grant, the finance guy, was standing right in the middle of it all. My mother hadn't just been manipulated. She was a willing accomplice. My personal bank account was a crime scene. My corporate network was the armory. The link was a single, obscure name. Silver Lantern Relief. The rage that had been a cold, hollow ache in my gut began to solidify, turning into something focused, something productive. I was no longer a daughter betrayed. I was Ava Monroe, head of payment risk, and a hostile entity was inside my perimeter. I turned away from my personal banking app and focused on the Norcrest vendor management portal. My system, my rules. The alert that had flagged the new vendor was still blinking. Vendor, Silver Lantern Relief. Sponsor, Mason Kerr, CFO. My blood ran colder. Mason, this wasn't some low-level accounts payable clerk. This came from the C-suite. Mason Kerr was a man who lived by spreadsheets. A man whose entire personality seemed to be budget adherence. He was the last person I'd expect to sponsor a vendor with a high-risk flag. I opened the vendor file, my credentials giving me full access. The digital paper trail was short, and it stank. Silver Lantern Relief had been onboarded 14 days ago. The justification was a new corporate giving initiative, the West Grove Cares Community Campaign. The notes section was full of buzzwords. Synergy, social impact, immediate deployment. The one I cared about was accelerated onboarding. My department had designed the standard vendor protocol. It was a rigorous, 20-day process involving deep KYC, know your customer, and KYV, know your vendor. We checked corporate registrations, OFAC watch lists, ultimate beneficial ownership, and bank account verifications. It was my wall against shell companies, money laundering, and fraud. This protocol had been bypassed. A note in the approval log read, KYC, KYV, process deferred 90 days per request of CFO. Urgent need for Q4 community campaign launch. Urgent need, I whispered, the classic excuse. It's the oldest play in the book. Create a fire, then use the panic to bypass the fire code. I drilled down into the vendor's corporate structure, the information they had provided. The parent entity was listed as Silver Lantern Relief Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit registered in Delaware 3 months ago. Standard. But the payment instructions, the actual bank details, they weren't directed to the foundation. They were routed to a separate, for-profit entity. Beneficiary, SLR Processing LLC. I froze. I toggled back to the screenshot of my personal bank statement. the 6 withdrawals, the destination of my $10,000. Merchant, SLR Processing LLC. It was a direct, irrefutable match. They weren't just similar, they were the same. The entity that had just been approved to receive millions in corporate donations from Norcrest Dynamics was the exact same entity that had siphoned my life savings this morning, using my mother as the delivery vector. This wasn't two separate schemes, it was one operation. My $10,000 wasn't the goal, it was the test run, a live fire exercise to ensure their payment channel worked before they pointed the corporate fire hose at it. And Mason Kerr, my CFO, had opened the floodgates. My mind flashed back 3 weeks. Mason had called me to his office on the 20th floor. His office was all glass and minimalist furniture, a stark contrast to my data-filled den. He'd been all smiles, offering me an artisanal coffee. "Ava," he'd said, leaning against his window overlooking the city. "I'm putting together a new oversight committee for our charitable grant-making, a passion project. I want you on it." "Mason, I'm not really the community outreach type," I'd replied. "My job is to say no to things." He'd laughed, a dry, papery sound. "That's exactly why I want you. We need your sharp eye. But we also need flexibility. We're partnering with new, agile nonprofits. They don't always have the 20-year history our system likes." He'd paused, looking at me intently. "This is about building relationships, not just ticking checklists. We need to be able to move fast. Don't be so strict. Ava, it's for a good cause." I'd declined. I'd cited the obvious conflict of interest. "My department audits the vendors you select. I can't be on the selection committee and the audit committee. It's a breach of governance." He had accepted my refusal, but his smile had tightened. "A shame. We could use your pragmatism." Pragmatism. He'd meant compliance. He was testing me, probing my defenses. When I'd held the line, he'd simply decided to go around me, using his authority as CFO to sign off on the bypass himself. He was building his flexible committee, and Silver Lantern was its first project. I needed to see the money. I opened my secure chat to my top data analyst, a guy named Ben who lived in the server-side logs. Me. "Ben, I need a quiet pull. Vendor ID 774 SLR. Specifically, all test transactions and micro deposits from the segregated clearing account. I'm looking for anything under the 2K threshold." Ben was fast. He was also a good analyst, which meant he was paranoid. The reply came back in under 2 minutes. "Ben, Ava, I can't. The entire vendor profile, 774 SLR, is locked." Me. "Locked? I'm in the file right now." Ben. "Not the file, the transaction ledger, the sub-accounts. It's been placed under an executive-level privacy hold. The firewall rule cites CFO-level sensitive negotiations." I try to run a query. I get access denied. I've never seen this. Not for a vendor. What's going on? Restricted by the CFO's office, he wasn't just bypassing my protocols. He was actively using his system privileges to blind my department. This was no longer negligence. This was obstruction. This was concealment. This was the moment. I had one card left to play. It was the break glass in case of emergency button my role afforded me. The Emergency Risk Authority. Using it would trigger a cascade of silent alerts to the CEO, the head of the audit committee, and our general counsel. It was the corporate equivalent of pulling a fire alarm. You only do it if you are 100% certain the building is on fire. I was certain. I could smell the smoke. I opened my override console. Initiate Emergency Protocol 9.3. Active Risk. Auth key. A. Monroe. Risk. Head. Bypass target. Vendor. Ledger. Or SLR. Justification. Suspected 409B violation. Active internal embezzlement. And UBO conflict. Execute. The screen flickered. The access denied firewall vanished. I was in. I didn't look at the money first. I looked at the history, the real history, the system logs that tracked every keystroke, every change, every approval. I went straight to the log file for the creation of the beneficiary, the bank account, the place the money was set to go. The log was terrifyingly simple. 20 OCT 2025, 143011. Vendor profile 774 SLR created by J. Price, ASCII 2 CFO. Plausible deniability. Mason wouldn't do it himself. 20 OCT 2025, 143204. KYV KYC. Diligence protocol status. Set to deferred by M. Psy Kerr, the direct override. 20 OC 2025, 143550. Beneficiary bank details. SLR Processing LLC. ACE NY9. Input by G. Lyle, external consultant. 20 OCT 2025, 143601. Beneficiary status. Set to verified approved. By G. Lyle, external consultant. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the name. G. Lyle. He had user credentials. He wasn't just a friend of my mother's. He was an external consultant for Norcrest Dynamics, an external consultant with the authority to not only input new bank accounts, but to unilaterally verify and approve them. This was the ultimate violation of dual control. This was the keys to the entire kingdom. No one should have that power. I ran a query on the user ID. G. Lyle. Name. Grant Lyle. Status. Active. Sponsor. Office of the CFO. Start date. 01 SEP 2025. He'd been in the system for less than 2 months. Hired by Mason. The pieces didn't just click. They slammed together. Grant, the finance guy, was the architect. He'd identified the vulnerability in Norcrest's new, rushed charitable push. Mason Kerr was his man on the inside, the executive sponsor with the power to bypass my defenses and create the consultant role for Grant. Grant built the pipeline, a new, verified vendor. And then, they needed to test it. They needed a guinea pig, a small, authenticated, real-world transaction from a real bank to their new shell company, SLR Processing LLC, just to make sure the money landed cleanly before they started moving corporate millions. And Grant knew exactly who to use. The daughter, the head of risk herself. The irony must have been delicious for him. He'd used my mother, Nora, to get my card details. He'd used her to plant the card back in my purse, and this morning, he and my mother had executed the test. My $10,000, the call from my mother, the hospital bill lie. It was all a script, a distraction. They weren't just stealing from the company. They were using my money to test their weapon, and they were doing it right under my nose. The discovery of Grant Lyle's name in my system log was the final tumbler in the lock. Everything fell open. The picture, once a chaotic mess of personal betrayal and corporate malfeasance, was now perfectly, terribly clear. It was one plan. Grant, the architect, had embedded himself with my mother to gain proximity to me, and with Mason to gain proximity to the company's treasury. He'd used Mason to build the pipeline, Silver Lantern Relief, and he'd used my mother to test it. My $10,000 was the canary in their coal mine, and the canary was dead. The rage was gone, replaced by the humming efficiency of my professional mind. I had the who, Grant, Mason, Mom, and the how, vendor bypass, my stolen card. Now I needed the what, the irrefutable, chain of custody proof that would stand up in a boardroom, and if necessary, a courtroom. I needed to tie my mother not just to the theft, but to the conspiracy. I turned my attention back to the first piece of evidence she had sent me, the hospital bill. It was still on my phone, a blurry, poorly composed JPG. I messaged it to my secure work desktop. The file was pathetically small, 112 kilobytes. I didn't even need to run a full analysis to see the file had been laundered, likely screenshotted, texted, and screenshotted again to destroy the original file's history. I ran it through my forensics toolkit anyway. The EXIF data, The digital fingerprint showing what camera took the photo, when, and where, was, as expected, scrubbed clean. An intentional act, a novice attempt to cover one's tracks, but they had covered the digital tracks, not the visual ones. I opened the image in an enhancement filter. I maxed the contrast and sharpened the edges. The text was vague, specialist services. Processing fee, but that wasn't what I was looking for. I scanned the edges, the margins, the negative space, and there, in the bottom right corner, almost completely lost in the digital noise and the bad cropping, was a watermark. It was faint gray text, set in a 6-point sans serif font. SLR intake form V.1. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up my spine. SLR, Silver Lantern Relief. I toggled back to the Norcrest vendor portal. I still had the emergency override active. I had full access to the Silver Lantern vendor file. I clicked on the subfolder labeled Branding and Collateral. Inside were logos, press release templates, and a file named Community Partner Intake V3, PDF. I opened it. The layout, the font, the precise kerning between the letters in services, it was a perfect match. My mother hadn't photographed a bill. She had taken a blank intake form from Grant's Shell Company, typed a few lines on it, and photographed that. It was a fabrication, and a lazy one at that. It was definitive proof that she was not a victim, but a participant. She had access to their internal, fraudulent documents. This was the first link. Now I needed the second. I needed to follow the money. Alder and Finch, my bank, had been a dead end. They'd told me the money was gone, transferred to a VeloPay e-wallet. They were right. They couldn't retrieve it, but they had given me the final transaction IDs. For them, it was the end of the line. For me, it was the beginning of the hunt. I logged into FinTrace, Norcrest's subscription service for digital currency and e-wallet forensics. It's what we use to track complex payment layering and bribery and money laundering schemes. I entered the primary transaction ID for the SLR Processing LLC VeloPay account. My screen lit up with a complex graph, a spiderweb of digital connections. The $10,000 had landed in the VeloPay account at 09:12 a.m. At 09:14 a.m., exactly as the bank had said, the funds were moved. My 6 transactions, which had been consolidated, were split again. The money spidered out, transferred instantly to 3 new VeloPay wallets. Wallet ID X881A received $3,150. Wallet ID X73CB received $3,900. Wallet ID X9E0D received $2,050. All 3 wallets had been created at 07:02 a.m. this morning. They existed for no other purpose than to receive these funds. This was classic layering, designed to break the chain and frustrate tracers. They were washing my money. But they were in a hurry. At 09:15 a.m., just 1 minute later, all 3 of those wallets, X881A, X73CB, and X9E0D, were emptied. Their entire balances were transferred in a single, consolidated transaction to one final, 4th wallet. This was the collection point, the ultimate beneficiary. I ran the trace on this final wallet. I pulled the registration data. It was a verified account, meaning the user had to upload ID. It wasn't an anonymous, fly-by-night wallet. They were arrogant. Account holder, NL support. Account verified, 18 OCT 2025, NL support. I stared at the 2 letters. NL. My mind raced through every corporate acronym, every possible meaning. Nothing clicked. And then it did, hitting me with the force of a physical blow. Nora Lyle. It was my mother's name, not the name she used, not Monroe. It was the name from her second marriage, a brief, disastrous union with a con artist that had lasted less than a year. 15 years ago. A name she had scrubbed from her life, a name she detested, a name she never used. It was the perfect digital alias, anonymous to the outside world, but to anyone who knew her history, it was as clear as a fingerprint. She hadn't just faked an invoice, She hadn't just handed over my card. She was the payee. The money was in an account under her name. NL support. She was supporting Grant. She was supporting the entire operation. All the air left my lungs. The hollow feeling was back. But it was no longer shock. It was a vacuum. The last shred of doubt, the last wisp of hope that she was just a pawn, was gone. She was a partner. I picked up my desk phone, its weight heavy and cold in my hand. My fingers were steady as I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring. "Ava? Honey? Is everything sorted out? I've been so worried." Her voice was a perfect imitation of maternal concern. The performance of it made my stomach turn. I didn't waste time. "You didn't pay a hospital bill." My voice was flat. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact. On the other end, there was only silence. Not a gasp, not a denial, just 3 full seconds of dead. Humming static. I could hear her breathing, a shallow intake of air. "Ava," she said finally, and the warm, worried mother was gone. Her voice was thin, reedy, and laced with the familiar, acidic tang of martyrdom. "You just don't understand. You sit up there in your glass tower, and you don't understand what other people are going through." "Other people?" I asked, my voice as cold and quiet as the grave. "Is other people named Mason Kerr? Or is his name Grant Lyle?" A sharp, rattling gasp, a tiny sound, like a mouse choking. Click. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. I looked at the receiver, then placed it slowly back in its cradle. The final confirmation. I didn't call back. There was nothing more to say. The last emotional connection had been severed, cauterized by her own hand. She wasn't my mother, not anymore. She was a co-conspirator. She was just another node in a fraud network, and I, Ava Monroe, was the head of risk control. My job was to cut them out. I turned back to my monitor. I closed the FinTrace graph. I closed the faked invoice. I closed the system logs. I opened a new, encrypted document on the Norcrest internal server, routed only to the General Counsel and the CEO. I typed the title, Project Chimera, Containment and Recovery Plan, Vendor 774 SLR. I began to write. I wasn't just getting my money back. I was going to dismantle their entire operation, and I was going to do it using the very system they thought they controlled. I started to write the plan for the trap. The line was dead, but the connection was made. My mother's panicked hang-up was the final data point I needed. They were linked, they were active, and they were arrogant. Now, I would use that arrogance against them. My fingers didn't just type, they executed commands. The emotional, betrayed daughter was gone, locked in a soundproof room deep inside my mind. In her place was the head of risk control, and I was moving from defense to a coordinated, multi-front attack. My first move was to create the official cover. I initiated a high-priority, Level 1A audit. 2. Audit Committee. M. Kerr, CFO. Legal Compliance. From A. Monroe, Head of Risk. Subject: Urgent, Snap Audit. Community Fund Cycle, Q4. Team: Due to irregularities flagged by the automated risk system in the new Q4 charitable vendor onboarding process, I am initiating an immediate snap audit of the community fund cycle. Effective 09/02 tomorrow. We need to ensure all disbursements are in full compliance before the public town hall. I hit send. It was the perfect pretext. Irregularities flagged by the automated system was technically true. My system had flagged Silver Lantern. Mason would read this and see it as a bureaucratic hurdle, not a targeted attack. He would see me as a nuisance to be managed, not a hunter. His arrogance was my shield. My second move was to create a false timeline, a distraction to make them consolidate their fabricated evidence. 2. M. Kerr, CFO, J. Price, Astaro, 2. CFO, G. Lyle, External Consultant. From A. Monroe, Head of Risk. Subject: Prep, Q4, Closeout Ledger Review, Community Fund. Mason, Grant. Further to my last email, I need to schedule an urgent pre-audit review for the Q4 ledger. Let's meet tomorrow at 4 p.m. to sign off on the initial disbursement ledger for the Westgrove Cares campaign. Please come prepared with all supporting documentation for new vendors, including diligence, invoices, and payment authorizations. This email was a lie. There was no 4 p.m. meeting. The true purpose was to send them scrambling. They would spend the next 24 hours manufacturing a paper trail for Silver Lantern relief, creating fake invoices, backdating diligence forms. They would be so busy building their cover story, they wouldn't see the real trap being laid. They would be gathering the very evidence I would later use to convict them. My third move was the bait, the digital honeypot. I still had my emergency system override active. I had full, invisible admin-level control. I navigated to the vendor onboarding portal and began to create a new beneficiary, a ghost. Vendor name, West Haven. Children's Care Foundation Bank, Westgrove Regional Trust Account, 88 Fort Wine. Justification, emergency grant for Q4 winter coat drive. Approved by. I linked the approval to a dormant cost center. It looked legitimate. It looked like another hurried, last-minute addition to the charitable fund, but I planted a bomb inside it. In the field for the Employer Identification Number, EIN, I entered a 9-digit string, 9999999. It was a critically invalid number. My system, the one I designed, has a hard-coded validation rule. It performs a real-time checksum against the IRS database. Any attempt to process a payment to this EIN would trigger a hard stop error. The system cannot approve it. It would be flagged, locked, and bounced to a human reviewer, me, with a 5-alarm fire alert. It was impossible to approve, unless a privileged user, someone like Grant or Mason, manually entered the database and physically bypassed the validation protocol. This was the test. If this West Haven ghost vendor, with its fatal flaw, was approved for payment, it would be the digital equivalent of a signed confession. It would be irrefutable proof of a bad actor inside the system, consciously and deliberately circumventing controls to push a fraudulent payment. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't flexibility. It was a crime, and I would have the keystroke log to prove it. I saved the file, seeded the trap, and logged out of the admin console. My fourth move was to deal with the human element, Nora. I picked up my phone. She didn't answer. Of course she didn't. She was scared. I sent a text, switching my tone from the cold daughter to the officious, neutral banker. Mom, I'm at the office. My call to you was logged as part of my initial fraud claim. My bank, Alder & Finch, has escalated the case. They see the funds were transferred to an account, NL Support, which they have flagged. If you do not cooperate, they will be forced to file a criminal complaint and freeze all associated accounts, including yours. It was a calculated, beautiful lie. The bank had done no such thing. Not yet. But she didn't know that. However, I continued. I believe this is a misunderstanding. I have a meeting at Norcrest tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. to process the reversal of the charges. You need to be here, in person, to sign the bank's affidavit stating you made the charge in error. It's the only way to unwind this and get the money back without legal action. I hit send. The bait was set. Reversal. Avoid legal action. She would see it as a lifeline, a way out, a way to fix the mess Grant had gotten her into. She would come. And when she did, she wouldn't be in a public cafe. She would be in Norcrest Conference Room 19B, a room that, per the sign on the wall, was subject to audio and video recording for quality and security purposes. A perfectly legal, fully disclosed recording. I booked the room. My fifth move was to marshal my allies, the ones who didn't know they were my allies yet. I called my executive contact at Alder & Finch. I didn't use the customer service line. I used my corporate risk management number. David, it's Ava Monroe at Norcrest. I'm escalating a personal fraud claim. Case 889-02B, 1 Webenstein. It's no longer a simple dispute. I have definitive evidence the beneficiary, SLR Processing LLC, is a shell company. I also have evidence this entity is a new, active vendor inside Norcrest Dynamics, sponsored by my CFO. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Ava, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying, I spoke with precision, that I have an active Section 314B situation. I have reason to believe a Norcrest employee is facilitating money laundering through your bank and my company. I need a full, high-priority trace on the VeloPay wallets, and I need you to be ready to execute a clawback and account freeze on my signal. This is a third-party material interest case. I'll be sending over the documentation from my legal counsel within the hour. The game had changed. This wasn't a daughter trying to get her $10,000 back. This was a financial institution's risk manager alerting another financial institution to a compromised account. David was 100% on my side now. The bank's resources were my resources. My sixth move, I called our general counsel. Sarah. My emergency protocol had already alerted her, and she was waiting. Ava, she said, her voice tight. Your 9.3 alert came through. This is not a drill, is it? It is not. The vector is the CFO's office. The entity is Silver Lantern Relief. The external actor is a consultant named Grant Lyle, and he has a personal accomplice, my mother, Nora Lyle. They tested their system on me this morning for $10,000. They're aiming for the corporate fund next. Sarah swore, a sharp, concise word. What do you have? I have the fabricated invoice, I said. I have the digital trace linking their shell company to my personal account. I have the logs showing Grant Lyle bypassing dual control, and I've just planted a honeypot vendor with a bad EIN. Good, she said. The digital trap. What do you need from me? I need the weapon. Sarah, I need an executive order, drafted and ready to sign by the chairman. A temporary, emergency revocation of all spending and system approval authority from the office of the CFO, including Mason Kerr and Grant Lyle, to be held in escrow. The trigger for its execution will be the moment that honeypot vendor, West Haven Children's Care, is approved for payment. Done, Sarah said. It'll be on the chairman's desk in an hour, waiting for the trigger. Be careful, Ava. My final move, the stage. Norcrest had a transparency town hall scheduled for the end of the week, a PR event to boost employee morale and launch the new community campaign. Mason was slated to be the keynote speaker, celebrating the very fund he was planning to rob. I called the office of Alan Reed, the chairman of the board. Mr. Reed's office, his assistant answered. This is Ava Monroe. Please inform the chairman that I accept his invitation to speak at the town hall. I will be providing a live demonstration of our new real-time risk control protocols for the community fund. Yes, it will be a dynamic part of the presentation. Please add me to the speaker list immediately following Mr. Kerr. The trap was set. Every piece was in motion. The bank was watching the wallets. Legal was watching the injunction. The chairman was watching the stage. And I was watching the honeypot. West Haven Children's Care, waiting for the digital validation to flip from error to approved. The only two people in the entire company who didn't know what was happening tomorrow were Mason Kerr, who was busy practicing his speech about trust, and my mother, Nora Lyle, who was rehearsing her lies for a 2 p.m. refund. The Norcrest Dynamics lobby was not a lobby. It was an atrium, a 3-story cathedral of glass and brushed steel designed to make clients and employees feel small but part of something massive. This afternoon, it was packed. 200 employees stood shoulder to shoulder, holding paper cups of coffee. In the back, by the ficus trees, a local news crew from West Grove 9 had a camera pointed at the podium. A massive vinyl banner hung from the second-floor mezzanine. Norcrest Cares, transparency in our community. On the polished marble podium, Mason Kerr was in his element. He was tanned, wearing a crisp blue shirt with no tie, the picture of the approachable, modern executive. He was selling them a story. And that's what this is about, he said, his voice smooth and amplified, echoing slightly in the big space. It's not just about giving, it's about trust. It's about a sacred covenant between our corporation and the community we serve. It's about building a framework of social impact, and today, we launch that framework. I was not in the crowd. I was standing at the back, next to the AV technician's cart, my laptop open. I wasn't watching Mason. I was watching a small, blinking red line on my admin dashboard. I had spent the morning in a state of vibrating, icy calm. My 2 p.m. meeting with Nora was 30 minutes away. I had already received a text. "Ava, I'm downstairs in the coffee shop. I'm scared. Can't we just talk there?" I texted back, 2 p.m., conference room 19B. "This is the only way to process the reversal. Don't be late." She would be walking into that recorded room right now. On my laptop screen, the red line pulsed. It was the system flag for my honeypot vendor. West Haven Children's Care. The invalid EIN was screaming error. On the podium, Mason smiled. "This fund will be the most transparent in our city's history. Every dollar in, every dollar out will be accounted for, managed with the highest integrity, and I am personally thrilled to announce our flagship partner in this endeavor, a foundation doing incredible work with at-risk youth." He was about to say it. He was about to say Silver Lantern Relief. On my screen, at 1:51 p.m., the red error tag flickered. A new log entry appeared. 1:51:02 p.m. Status: error. 1:51:04 p.m. Status: pending manual override. 1:51:09 p.m. Status: approved. The trap was sprung. They'd done it. They'd pushed the fraudulent payment during the town hall, likely thinking it was the perfect cover. Mason opened his mouth. "Our flagship partner." "Excuse me, Mr. Kerr?" My voice cut through the room. I hadn't shouted, but the microphone at the AV cart was live. The technician looked at me, horrified. A high-pitched squeal of feedback ripped through the lobby. Every head turned. The West Grove 9 camera swung off Mason and zoomed in on me. Mason squinted against the stage lights, his smile frozen, his eyes slits of cold fury. "Ms. Monroe, this is an unscheduled interruption." "My apologies, Mason," I said, my voice resonating through the speakers. Calm and clear, I began to walk forward, my heels clicking on the marble. "I was just so inspired by your words, especially your comments on transparency and integrity. I thought this would be the perfect moment for a live demonstration." I reached the steps to the low stage. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked up and stood beside him, taking the handheld microphone from its cradle. "A demonstration, Ms. Monroe?" Mason said, his voice tight. He was trapped. In front of 200 employees and the press, he couldn't tell me to get off the stage. "Yes," I said, turning to the crowd. They were silent, rapt. This was better than a free donut. This was drama. As head of risk, I've just rolled out a new real-time validation protocol to protect this very fund. Mason, you were just talking about accountability for every dollar out. Why don't we show them what that accountability looks like, right now? I nodded to the technician. "Patch my laptop to the main screen, please. AV input 2. Mason's face was white. "Ava, I'm not sure this is the time for a technical drill." "It's the perfect time," I said. The massive 20-foot screen behind us flickered. Mason's Norcrest Cares logo vanishing, replaced by my simple, clean admin dashboard. The live payment approval queue. "This," I said, using the microphone like a professor, "is the new firewall for the community fund. Every payment request, every grant, passes through this system. Most are approved in milliseconds." I pointed to a line item. "Here's one, $5,000 to the West Grove Food Bank. The system verified their EIN, their bank, their nonprofit status, all clear, approved." Then, I clicked on my honeypot. The screen refreshed, showing the West Haven Children's Care file. "And here is another one, a new request, $25,000 for a winter coat drive." A few people in the crowd murmured, "Oh, nice." "It is nice," I agreed. "But look, I highlighted the system log. The screen flashed with a huge, impossible-to-miss red banner. System warning. Invalid IN. Payment failed validation. This, I said, my voice hardening, is a hard stop. An EIN is a non-profit social security number. This one is invalid. It's a fake. The system has automatically blocked this $25,000 payment. This is the firewall working. This is what protects our company. I paused, letting the red warning burn into their eyes. Mason was rigid, a statue. But, I continued, our system doesn't just block fraud. It logs the attempt. It tells us who is trying to bypass our controls. Let's look at the log for this payment, shall we? I clicked. The override log filled the screen. At 1:51 p.m. today, less than 3 minutes ago, as Mr. Kerr was speaking about integrity, a user with high-level administrative privilege manually forced this payment through. They deliberately and consciously ignored the system's hard stop warning. I zoomed in on the log entry. The text was 10 feet high. 1:51:09 p.m. Status, error, change to approved. User, J, Price, Astra to CFO. Authorization, temporary admin privilege, granted by I zoomed in again on the final, critical line. Authorization, temporary admin privilege, granted by Nora Lyle, external KYC consultant. A massive collective gasp, a wave of who and what rippled through the lobby. The news camera was fixed on the screen, capturing the name. Nora Lyle, I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. An external consultant hired by the CFO's office, the same consultant, as it happens, who is the registered owner of NL Support, the e-wallet account that received $10,000 stolen from my personal bank account this morning. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. 200 people had stopped breathing. Mason Kerr looked like he had been shot. I turned to the crowd, my voice ringing with an authority he could never have. Due to this documented, active, and ongoing breach of financial control, and due to a clear conspiracy to defraud this company, I am invoking Emergency Clause 9.3 of the Norcrest Risk Protocol, effective immediately. All assets and disbursements from the Community Fund are frozen. All approval authority from the Office of the CFO is suspended, pending a full external investigation. Mason finally found his voice. He grabbed the podium microphone, his hand shaking, and he laughed. It was a terrible, cracking, papery sound. Ava, stop this, he choked out, looking at the crowd, then at me. This is absurd. This is clearly a technical glitch. A bug in your new system. You're overwhelming it. I don't know any Nora Lyle. This is a system error. He was pleading. He was trying to create doubt. I looked at him, and for the first time, I let the coldness in my face show. A glitch, Mason? I said into my microphone. A system error? I reached into my blazer pocket. You're right. We should clear up this error. I pulled out the small, black digital audio recorder. I held it up. It was the recorder that had been sitting on the conference table in room 19B for the last 30 minutes. The recorder that Nora, in her panic, had confessed everything to, believing it was her only way out. This system error seems to be a person, I said, and she's been talking. I believe this recording of my meeting, which concluded just 5 minutes ago, will clarify everything, in your own words, and in hers. I pressed the play button. The small click echoed like a gunshot in the vast, silent lobby. The click was small, almost lost in the cavernous lobby, but the silence that followed was absolute, a pressurized void. The 200 employees, the news crew, Mason Kerr, all frozen. And then, a voice, my mother's. It wasn't her concerned mom voice, or even her martyred victim voice. It was a voice I had never heard. It was reedy, conspiratorial, and whining. It's not stealing. Grant, it's an advance. Her voice echoed, tinny and thin, from the recorder. A temporary loan. Ava has so much. She won't even notice it's gone for a few days. You said Mason will cycle it back from the main fund before her statement even closes, right? A collective shudder went through the crowd. This was private. This was raw. People looked at the floor, at each other, at Mason, who was shaking his head in a jerky, repetitive motion. Then, Grant's voice, oily, patient, and utterly contemptuous. He will. Mason's handling the corporate side. That's the whole point of the community fund. All you have to do is get the card. Nora, we test the payment channel. It works. And by tomorrow, we're ready for the real prize. Mason has the keys. This is, Mason whispered, his hand on the podium. This is slander. This is fabricated. And then, his own voice filled the lobby. It was from a phone call, clearly recorded. Look, Grant, this is getting sloppy. Mason's recorded voice snapped. Nora is a liability. Ava isn't the type to overlook a $10,000 error. She's not an idiot. She builds the firewalls. Grant's voice again. So, you're the CFO. Handle it. You said you could. Turn off the alerts for a few hours. By the time she flags it, the money will be gone. We'll have our proof of concept, and we'll be ready to move on the fund. A heavy sigh. The sound of a man cornered. Mason's voice. Fine. I can suppress the high-velocity alerts from her personal IP for 2 hours, but if she calls the bank, if she flags it before the money clears to the wallet, this whole thing, it's over. And finally my mother's voice, a whisper, but the microphone picked it up with devastating clarity, a whisper filled with a lifetime of acidic resentment. She won't. She's my daughter. She owes me. She owes this family. It's time she learned how to share. I pressed the stop button. The silence that rushed back in was deafening, a physical weight. The news camera was fixed on my face, but I wasn't looking at it. I wasn't looking at Mason, who was gray, his mouth opening and closing silently, no sound coming out. I turned my head, slowly, and scanned the front row, and the crowd parted, following my gaze. There, sitting in the second row, between 2 HR managers, was my mother. She'd been given a front row seat by Mason's office. A community partner badge was pinned crookedly to her blouse. She was here to watch the triumph. Now, she was a statue. She had gone perfectly, impossibly still. Her purse clutched in her lap, her eyes wide, staring at me. She was a small animal caught in a floodlight, realizing the light was not salvation, but the train. Mom, I said. My voice was quiet, but the microphone carried it to every corner of the glass atrium. You're here. Good. I walked off the stage, my heels clicking on the 2 marble steps, and stood in the aisle about 10 feet from her. The employees between us shrank back, creating a perfect, clear lane. You said, I continued, my voice calm, conversational, as if we were in her kitchen, that you needed the money for a bill, an emergency, a hospital bill. I took 1 step closer. She flinched, a full body jerk. She tried to stand, but her legs seemed to buckle. I have just one question for you. I took another step. What hospital was that? What procedure? Tell me. Nora, tell these people what bill was worth $10,000. She got to her feet, finally, clutching the back of the chair in front of her. She was shaking so violently her badge rattled against the buttons of her blouse. Ava, no, please, don't do this. You don't understand. I don't? I asked, my voice holding no anger, no emotion at all, just fact. It was for Grant, she finally burst out, the words tearing from her throat in a ragged, desperate sob that echoed in the atrium. The confession. He had an old loan. From before. They were going to hurt him. It was a debt. He just needed to clear it. I was just trying to save him. He said it was just an advance, just a loan. An advance, I repeated, nodding. From my life savings. From the family, she shrieked, her voice cracking, her face crumpling. He said Mason would put it back. He said you'd never know. He said it was nothing to you. Enough! Mason roared. He had found his voice, and it was a bellow of pure, cornered panic. He grabbed the podium, trying to regain control, to command the room. "This is a disgrace," he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me, then at my mother. "This is a family dispute, a personal, sordid matter being aired in public. This has nothing to do with Norcrest dynamics." He was trying to build a new wall, to separate the personal from the corporate. He pointed, his hand trembling, at my mother. This woman, Nora Lyle, she is an external consultant. We have a new pilot program for community-based KYC verifiers. She was authorized to be in our system as part of that pilot. He was trying to legitimize her, to normalize the name on the screen, to make her a rogue employee, not a co-conspirator. Her actions are her own. She tricked Mr. Lyle. She tricked my assistant. She abused her temporary credentials to slander me. Security! Escort this woman out of the building." He looked around, desperate, but the two Norcrest security officers near the wall hadn't moved. "He's right," I said, my voice cutting through his tirade. I turned and walked calmly back toward the stage. Mason watched me, a tiny, desperate flicker of hope in his eyes. He thought he'd found an exit, a plausible defense. "He's absolutely right," I said, stopping by the AV cart. "She is listed as an external consultant, but in my audit this morning, I found another glitch in the system." I looked across the crowd and met the eyes of Sarah, our general counsel. She was standing by the main pillar, her arms crossed. She gave me a single, grim nod. I had our general counsel's office pull the master services agreement for this consultant. As you all know, every contractor, every consultant, must have a fully executed contract and a statement of work on file with legal to be granted system access. It's not just our policy, it's federal law. I bent down and picked up a single, 2-inch thick, comb-bound document from the cart's lower shelf. I held it up for all to see. "This," I said, "is the entire file of active consultant contracts for the CFO's office for this quarter, all 42 of them. I read them all before this meeting." I let the pages fall open. There is no contract for a Nora Lyle. There is no statement of work. There is no invoice history. There is no W-9. There is no background check authorization. I looked up from the document, past the crowd, past the camera, and locked my eyes on Mason Kerr. My voice dropped, but the microphone carried the lethal payload to every corner of the room. "She doesn't exist in our legal system. Her user account was a ghost, a phantom, created by Grant Lyle, with your executive override, for the sole and express purpose of approving fraudulent payments from this fund." Mason Kerr stopped breathing. The blood drained from his face, leaving a waxy, gray-green pallor. He looked past me, past the stunned employees, his eyes searching desperately, looking up at the mezzanine. He was looking for Alan Reed, the chairman of the board. Reed was there. He'd been standing in the mezzanine the entire time, looking down, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. The chairman didn't shout. He didn't make a sound. He simply looked at the two uniformed Norcrest security officers standing near the main entrance. He gave a short, sharp nod. The crowd, which had been pressing in, parted like water. The two officers, big men in crisp blue blazers, began walking. They didn't walk toward my mother, who was now weeping hysterically into her hands. They walked past her. They walked directly to the stage, their footsteps silent on the carpeted aisle, then loud as they hit the marble steps. Mason saw them coming. He backed away from the podium, his hands half raised as if in surrender. Wait, he stammered. "Wait just a minute. This is a misunderstanding. This is Ava's. She's unstable. This is a personal vendetta." They didn't stop. They reached the top of the stage. They flanked him. "Mr. Kerr," the first officer said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Please come with us, quietly." The words, spoken in a calm monotone, were more final than any shout. Mason recoiled, looking from one security officer to the other. His eyes were wide, darting like a trapped animal, looking for an exit he knew didn't exist. This is a mistake. You can't. I'm the CFO. Alan, you can't let her do this. From the mezzanine, Alan Reed, the chairman, simply turned his back. It was a brutal, silent execution. As the officers each took one of Mason's arms, my own phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't a text. It was a secure email from David at Alder and Finch, the one I had been waiting for. I pulled it out, my thumb already on the biometric sensor. The subject line was simple. Action executed. Case 88902B116. The body was even better. Ava. Per our 1:45 p.m. call. The 3114B escalation was successful. We have executed a 72-hour administrative freeze on VeloPay accounts associated with SLR Processing LLC and the verified beneficiary NL Support, pending law enforcement review. The intermediary processor, FinFast, has been served. They have acknowledged the fraudulent transfer and are initiating an emergency clawback under their merchant breach protocol. Funds are being reversed. The trap wasn't just here. It was everywhere. It was total. Let go of me. I need to make a call. Mason was struggling now, his corporate polish gone, revealing the raw panic beneath. He was fumbling in his pocket, trying to get his phone. He was trying to call Grant, trying to tell him to move the money, to run. I wouldn't bother. Mason, I said, my voice cutting through his panicked shouts. The lobby was dead silent again, watching. I walked back to the AV cart and switched the input. The screen behind the stage flickered, the log of Nora Lyle vanishing. It was replaced by a live mirror of my phone's screen. The crowd saw my Alder and Finch bank app. They saw the string of red, negative transactions from that morning. $1,850 to SLR Processing LLC, $1,550 to SLR Processing LLC, $1,900 to SLR Processing LLC, all the way down to my devastated balance. At 1:45 p.m., I announced, my voice a cold, clear narrative. I provided Alder and Finch with definitive proof of a conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering, linking a corporate vendor to my personal account. The bank, in turn, has just forced a reversal from the intermediary processor. I hit the refresh button on my app. The crowd watched in real time. A new set of transactions appeared, this time in green, plus $1,050. Reversal pending, plus $1,550. Reversal pending, plus $1,900. Reversal pending. My balance, which had been negative, ticked upward with each line, climbing back out of the red. A low, "Whoa," rippled through the employees. It was one thing to hear about fraud. It was another to watch 10,000 stolen dollars digitally clawed back, live on a 20-foot screen. This was the end. Mason saw it. He finally wrenched his phone from his pocket, his thumb jabbing at the screen. "You can't do this!" he screamed, holding it to his ear. Grant, The head of security didn't snatch the phone. He simply stepped in front of Mason and held out his hand. Palm up. "Sir, the phone. It is now part of an internal investigation. Please." Mason stared at him, his face contorted. He knew. With a strangled, defeated sound, he let his arm drop. The officer plucked the phone from his limp fingers and dropped it into a sealed, silver-gray evidence bag. His last line of communication was cut. He was isolated. "Mr. Kerr," the officer said, taking his arm again. "Let's go." This time, it wasn't a request. As they began to lead him off the stage, Sarah, our general counsel, materialized at my elbow. She wasn't holding a document. She was holding a tablet. "Ava," she said quietly, "the chairman has executed the order. It just needs your signature to be enacted." She handed me the tablet. On the screen was the document I had requested, the one drafted in hell just yesterday. Emergency temporary suspension of fiduciary powers. Office of the CFO, per Clause 9.3, active risk. I took the stylus. I signed my name at the bottom, Ava Monroe. I hit execute. The order was now live. The CFO's office was officially neutered, and I was, for all intents and purposes, in control of the company's financial risk protocols. Mason was at the bottom of the steps. The news camera was following him. The flash a strobe light on his ashen, sweating face. And that's when my mother, who had been a frozen pillar of grief, broke. She stumbled forward, pushing past a bewildered-looking analyst. She ran, not to Mason, but to me. She stopped at the foot of the stage, her hands clutching at the sharp edge, her face a ruin of tears and running mascara. Ava, stop this, please. It was just money, she wailed, her voice echoing in the horrified silence. It was your money, yes, but you're my daughter. You'd make it back. You always do. It was just money. I looked down at her, from the stage. I was physically above her. I looked at this woman, this stranger, her fingers clawing at the wood, her face pleading for an absolution I did not have, the last shred of me, the part that was a daughter, withered and died. I knelt, not to comfort her, but to be on her level, so she could hear me clearly, so the microphones wouldn't. My voice was a whisper, but it was harder than the marble floor. I don't make it back, I said, my voice shaking with a cold, precise fury. I earn it. I earn it with my reputation. I earn it with my skill. I earn it with trust. I looked into her wet, uncomprehending eyes. You didn't just take money, Mom. You took that. You stole the trust. And that you can never make back. Her face collapsed, as if I had physically struck her. She let go of the stage and crumpled, her sobs now silent, guttural, a sound of utter despair. I stood up. I turned my back on her. The chairman, Alan Reed, was at the podium. He tapped the microphone, his face grim. As of this moment, he said, his voice a deep baritone that commanded immediate authority. Mr. Kerr is suspended, effective immediately. The board has already convened. We are retaining an independent, external forensic auditing firm. They will be on site by end of day. Every transaction this office has touched in the last 6 months will be examined. He looked at the news camera. Norcrest has a zero-tolerance policy for this. Zero. We will be transparent. We will be swift. And we will cooperate fully with the authorities. The reporter from West Grove 9, sensing the end, shouted the first question. Ms. Monroe? Ms. Monroe? What does this say about the company's internal controls? I stepped forward, back to the podium, past the chairman. I looked directly into the camera. My face was pale, I was sure, but my voice was iron. It says the controls worked, I said. The process is there for a reason. Today, the process won. I said nothing else. I stepped back, ceding the microphone to the chairman, who began the formal, managed press conference. I walked off the stage, past my mother, who didn't look up, past Sarah, who gave me a look of profound, grim respect. I walked through the silent, staring crowd of my colleagues, who parted from me as if I was a queen or a leper. I didn't care which. I went back to the AV cart, my fortress. I picked up my laptop. My hands were perfectly steady. I toggled from the presentation feed back to my personal bank account. I hit refresh. The 6 green transactions no longer said reversal pending. They were gone, and my balance, at the top of the screen, was $10,007.84. The screen flickered. A new push notification appeared from the Alder and Finch app. Transaction alert, $10,000 phone dollars. Status, completed. It was back, all of it. I closed the laptop. The crowd was still listening to the chairman. Mason was gone. My mother was just a heap on the floor. It was over. The lobby was cleared in under an hour. The aftermath was quieter than the event. A sudden, sterile vacuum where the chaos had been. The West Grove 9 news crew was gone, politely and firmly escorted out by building security. Employees, stunned into silence, were dismissed back to their desks in hushed, nervous clusters. My mother had been handled. Sarah, our general counsel, had quietly assigned a junior associate to see Mrs. Lyle to a car, a cold, corporate euphemism for being thrown off the premises while security watched. I spent the next 3 hours in an emergency session on the 20th floor with Alan Reed and a team of external forensic auditors who had been on site within 90 minutes. They looked less like accountants and more like federal agents, all dark suits and zero emotion. Ms. Monroe, the lead auditor, a woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, said, her voice clipped, "Your documentation is immaculate. The logs are clean. The honeypot vendor was a thing of beauty." "It was a necessary diagnostic tool," I replied, my voice flat. I was running on pure, refined adrenaline. There was no emotion left. At 4:52 p.m., the chairman's assistant poked his head in. "Sir, a courier just delivered this from Mr. Kerr's attorneys." He handed Alan a single, cream-colored envelope. Alan Reed read the letter inside, his face impassive. He then slid it across the polished mahogany table to me. It was Mason's resignation, effective immediately. The letter was a masterpiece of legal cowardice, a preemptive strike against his inevitable termination. He took full responsibility for a critical failure of operational oversight and a severe lapse in fiduciary judgment. He blamed overly ambitious timelines for the community project and the unforeseen, criminal, and deeply manipulative actions of a rogue external consultant, Grant Lyle. He never used the word steal. He never used the word conspiracy. It was all lapse and misjudgment. "He's trying to frame it as gross negligence, not criminal intent," I said, sliding the letter back. "It won't work," Sarah, who was also in the room, said without looking up from her laptop. "We have the audio recording of his phone call with Lyle. We have the system log showing his direct override. We are handing the complete, unedited file to the district attorney's office at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Mason Kerr, Grant Lyle, and Nora Lyle." Sarah continued, her fingers still flying. "As for Silver Lantern Relief, its vendor status was terminated at 2:01 p.m. The moment you sign the order, all pending and future payments are void. Their incorporation documents, along with the chain of custody for SLR Processing LLC, are now part of the DA's package. They are done." I left the office at midnight. The building was silent. My apartment, when I walked in, felt wrong. It was too quiet, too still. The adrenaline from the day had finally, catastrophically, drained away, leaving a deep, physical ache in my bones, a hollowness that felt like starvation. I was exhausted, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. I sat on my sofa in the dark, my laptop the only light in the room, the city's glow a cold blue against my windows. I did what I always do when I can't process emotion. I checked the data. I opened the family text message group chat. It was a digital wildfire. 47 unread messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins. "Ava, call me." "What is going on? Saw the news? They said Mason Kerr? Is Aunt Nora okay? Someone said security made her leave? Ava, this is serious. Call your father." I scrolled past the noise, looking for one name. Grant. He was gone. His name, which had been there this morning, was now just a gray, system-generated line. Grant Lyle has left the group, a digital ghost. I searched his name on Facebook, then LinkedIn, his profiles, the ones that had been so full of smug vacation photos and claims of private equity success, were gone, a 404 error. He hadn't just run. He had performed a digital self-immolation. He had burned the evidence of his virtual existence. He was a professional, after all. My phone, sitting on the coffee table, vibrated. A new message, not from the group, a long text, from Nora. It was an ocean of text, a wall of justifications and accusations so long I had to scroll. Ava, you don't understand. You've destroyed us. You've destroyed Mason, a good man. Grant is gone. I'm all alone. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was just trying to help. Grant was in trouble, real trouble. And you have so much. You always have. I'm your mother. A family is supposed to be there for each other, to lean on. You lean on me for emotional support. I lean on you for money. That's how it works. You're so cold. You never understood that. This was a mistake and you turned it into a public execution. You humiliated me. You humiliated yourself. I still love you. You're my daughter. Please call me. We can fix this. I know you can fix this. I stared at the words. I lean on you for money. That's how it works. It wasn't an apology. It was an invoice. It was her mission statement. She wasn't sorry for the theft. She was furious about the consequences. My fingers were cold, but they were steady. I typed one reply. A family is not a payment gateway. I sent it. Then I blocked her number. The next morning, I was in Sarah's office at 8 a.m. The DA is moving fast, she said, handing me a coffee. They're delighted. They're moving on indictments for Kerr and Lyle, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, aggravated corporate embezzlement. They're also adding Nora Lyle as a material co-conspirator. The NL support wallet was the smoking gun. I held up my hand. No, Sarah froze. Ava, what? She was on the audio. She's the owner of the wallet. She's not a pawn. She's a perpetrator. I know exactly what she is, I said, my voice flat. But she is not going to be prosecuted. That is not your decision. That's up to the district attorney. He'll listen to the primary victim, I said. On the personal theft of the $10,000, I am the victim. On the corporate side, Norcrest is the victim, and I am its representative who stopped the crime before a corporate dollar was lost. We are going to offer a deal. A deal? Sarah looked at me, her legal mind processing. On what grounds? On the grounds that I want this finished, I said. I'm offering a deal on behalf of myself and the company. We will both file a victim's impact statement requesting the DA decline to press criminal charges against Nora Lyle, contingent on 2 non-negotiable conditions. I slid a sheet of paper across her desk. I had written it at 3 a.m. Yeah, she repays her share. I don't care about my $10,000. The bank clawed it back. I'm talking about the cost, the emergency audit, the legal fees, the reputational damage. My $10,000 was the test run, so she can pay $10,000. Not to me, to the Norcrest Cares Community Fund, a public donation. She can sell her car. I don't care. Sarah nodded slowly. And the second condition? A permanent, legally binding severance, I said. She signs a restraining order, not a physical one, a financial and professional one. She is never to contact me, my employer, my banks, or any financial institution on my behalf, ever again. She is never to use my name. She is never to come within 500 feet of a Norcrest building. For all financial purposes, she is dead to me. She severs all contact, or the deal is off, and you hand the NL support wallet ID to the DA. She can be a co-conspirator, or she can be a ghost. Her choice. Sarah stared at the paper. This is cold. It's risk management, I said. She is a known vulnerability. I am patching the vulnerability permanently. While Sarah's office sent the offer to my mother's new, shell-shocked lawyer, I went to work on my own. I met a locksmith at my apartment on my lunch break. Just a rekey? He asked. No, I said. New locks, high security, digital panel, and the deadbolt. As he worked, I sat on my laptop. I logged into the prepaid card account I had given her. Balance, $12.19. I transferred the balance to my checking account and terminated the card. Card status, closed. I opened my Alder and Finch profile. Emergency contacts. I deleted Nora Monroe. I added Sarah's name. I updated my will, changing the executor from my mother to a corporate trust. I was severing every wire. Back at the office, people gave me a wide berth. They nodded. But they were nervous. I was no longer just Ava from Risk. I was the woman who had publicly executed the CFO. Alan Reed called me to his office. "Ava," he said, "the board is deeply grateful. The press. It could have been catastrophic. But your line? The process won. That's our new motto. The board has approved a new quarterly transparency day, a full public audit of the community fund, live for all employees. They've unanimously requested you run it." It wasn't a request. It was a crown. "I would be honored. Mr. Reed," I said. 2 days later, Sarah called. She signed it, all of it, the restraining order, the repayment plan. She sold her car this morning. The $10,000 is already in the fund. The DA is dropping her from the indictment. "Good," I said. I felt nothing, just the clean click of a case file being closed. I hung up. I pulled out my phone. I unblocked her number for one final moment. This wasn't for the lawyers. This wasn't for the company. This was for me. I sent a text. "We need to meet. One last time. No audience. No lawyers. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. The coffee shop opposite my office. Then we are done." She replied in 10 seconds. Yes, it was 6 p.m. The coffee shop. The daily grind was almost empty. It was the hour when the day shift had fled and the night shift had not yet arrived. A vacuum in the city's pulse. It smelled of stale coffee grounds and burnt sugar. Through the plate glass window, the Norcrest Dynamics building loomed across the street, a sheer cliff of dark glass and steel, its lights just beginning to outshine the bruised purple of the twilight. I saw her before I entered. She had chosen a small table in the back corner, as far from the window as possible. She looked small, not just sad or tired, but physically smaller, as if the events of the last 3 days had compressed her, leaching the color and vibrance from her. She was wearing a beige cardigan, the kind of shapeless, oatmeal-colored garment designed to make a person disappear. I had not come alone. Behind me, a man in a quiet, inexpensive suit entered. He was an independent notary and mediator, supplied by Sarah's office. His presence was part of the agreement. This was not a reconciliation. It was the execution of a contract. I sat down. The man stood silently by the end of the table. Nora flinched when I pulled out the chair. A sharp, nervous spasm. She didn't look at me. She stared at the scratched Formica tabletop. "Nora," I said. My voice was quiet, neutral. The mediator placed a small, portable audio recorder on the table, the same kind I had used in the conference room. He pressed record. "This meeting is being recorded to confirm compliance with legal agreement C-44A9, he said in a monotone. Nora's hands were trembling in her lap. She finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, puffy, but dry. She had run out of tears. "Ava," she whispered. It was a plea. I didn't respond. I just waited. I was not here as Ava. I was here as the other party to the contract. Her hand, shaking so badly she almost dropped it, retrieved a white business envelope from her purse. It was not a personal envelope. It was a cashier's check envelope. She slid it across the table. Her fingers recoiled from it as if it were burning. It's the part Grant gave me," she stammered, her gaze fixed on the table. From the test. He called it seed money. It was $2,000. I had to sell my mother's jewelry to get it back. The car only covered the $10,000 for the company. This is the rest. It's all of it." So, that was it. The final piece. She had been paid for her part. I didn't touch the envelope. I looked at the mediator. He picked it up, opened it, and examined the cashier's check inside. He compared the amount to a number on the document he was holding. He nodded. "The financial stipulation of the severance agreement is now met," he said. He then slid 2 copies of the document across to me, along with a pen. It was the final, notarized version of the restraining order and financial severance, the one she had already signed. It was my turn to countersign, to close the loop. I picked up the pen. Her eyes followed the movement, desperate, like a starving animal watching a hand that might hold food or a stone. "Ava," Please, she whispered, the words breaking. Don't do this. He's gone. Mason's gone. I paid it all back. It's over. We can fix this. I'm still your mother. I paused, the pen hovering over the signature line. I looked at her. I saw the face that had taught me to tie my shoes, the hands that had packed my lunches, and I saw the face on the audio log. The voice that said, "She owes me. It's time she learned how to share." I saw the ghost user, Nora Lyle, the NL support wallet, the fabricated invoice. I saw a system vulnerability, a critical security flaw that had been exploited and, if left unpatched, would be exploited again. "You are," I said, my voice as quiet as hers, "still my mother." Her face flooded with a desperate, terrible hope. Her eyes lit up. She started to reach her hand across the table. I pressed the pen to the paper. The scratching sound was loud in the silence. I signed my name, Ava Monroe. "And I continued, "am still the person who keeps the process." Her face crumpled. The light went out. It was a switch being thrown. Her hand, halfway across the table, froze, then retreated, as if she had touched a hot stove. She understood, not the why. She would never understand that. But she understood the what. She understood that the door was closed, locked, and the key had just been dissolved in acid. I signed the second copy. The mediator took them, slid my copy into a fresh envelope, and handed it to me. He put his recorder away. "The agreement is executed and legally binding. Good evening, Ms. Monroe, Mrs. Lyle." He turned and left the coffee shop. We were alone, just a woman and her mother, separated by 3 feet of cheap laminate and a lifetime of bad transactions. I stood up. I put my copy of the agreement in my bag. "Ava," she said, one last time, her voice a dead leaf. Where will I go?" It was the first honest question she had asked me in 20 years. "I don't know," I said. "That's not part of my process." I turned and walked away. I did not look back. The cold evening air hit my face, sharp and clean, washing away the smell of burnt coffee. The automatic doors of the Norcrest Tower slid open as I approached. The lobby was vast, empty, and beautifully silent. The marble floor gleamed under the soft, recessed lighting. I stood in the center of the great glass atrium, the place where it had all ended, the massive digital ticker, the one that usually showed stock prices and company birthdays, was scrolling a new message, set by the chairman's office. Norcrest Board declares full confidence in risk control protocols. It scrolled past. External audit complete. No corporate funds lost. All community fund transactions verified. It scrolled past. Former CFO Mason Kerr and Associate Grant Lyle indicted by DA on 12 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. I watched the names scroll by. 2 ghosts in the machine. My phone vibrated in my pocket. One single, quiet buzz. I pulled it out. It was not a text. It was not an email. It was a push notification from the Alder and Finch app, the one I had been waiting for. The final echo. Transaction alert. $10,000. Status? Completed. The pending status was gone. The clawback was finalized. The transaction was complete. My balance was whole. I looked at the number. 10,784. It was just a number. I silenced the notification. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb. I didn't need any more alerts. The case was closed. I looked up and caught my reflection in the dark. Soaring glass. I saw the lobby, the city lights behind me, and my own face, pale and composed. My access badge was still clipped to my blazer. The light caught the silver lettering, Ava Monroe, head of risk. The equation was balanced. A vulnerability had been identified, isolated, and neutralized. The system was secure. I smiled. Just a very slight, very brief lift at the corner of my mouth. The books were balanced. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Let us know in the comments below so we can connect. and share your thoughts on Ava's final decision. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and give us a massive boost by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.